In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
That's what we were told. Most Americans never believed Lee Oswald was the lone gunman, for excellent reasons. In fact, there were at least 6 shooters who fired from 8 to 10 shots or more who are identified here. We have, finally, the solution to the greatest murder mystery in history, laid out for the world to see, proof after proof after proof. Photos were faked, the body was changed, x-rays were altered, the home movies were fixed. 15 experts contribute to a 529-page book with 1,037 photos and diagrams in black and white and color.
Hi, this is Gary King. If you'd like JFK, who, how, and why, and would like to support the new JFK show, then go to patriotradiobooks.com. That's patriotradiobooks.com.
This is The Real Deal with Jim Fetzer, the premier show on JFK information on the internet.
Proud of it, too, and we're working hard to keep it that way.
Yeah, well, tonight we're going to talk about the JFK Horsemen, which I have coined this term to refer to the motorcycle patrolmen, the officers, the Dallas police officers, who were escorting the JFK limo on the 22nd of November of 1963, the day of the assassination. We've been working on this for more than a year now, combining information mostly from the internet, new information that we have gleaned from tape recordings that have surfaced recently, from interviews, phone interviews that were done by Fred Newcomb in 1971 for his book Murder from Within. And we've come up with a lot of good information that sort of comes to give us a better idea of what happened in those crucial, I would say, 10 to 15 seconds on Elm Street.
Yes,
you said assassination.
Yeah, you said something most interesting. You said that one of the first books that came out was 6 Seconds in Dallas, when that may have been a psyop right there, because it was more like 15. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, you know, back in 1966, one of the first books that came out criticizing the Warren Commission was by Josiah Thompson, and the title of that book, the title was 6 Seconds in Dallas. Well, 6 seconds referring to the time where they thought that the assassination took place during those crucial supposed 6 seconds on Elm Street. Well, now, with all this new information that we have, it starts to become more and more the case where it might have been as much as 15 seconds.
A mountain of evidence to substantiate that. We have new information tonight, and that's why we want to take the lead in the JFK research community and earn everyone's trust that we're really trying as hard as we can to bring new information and accurate information. We do this for a passion for the truth and to help you along your journey, because we have taken this journey and we've encountered many pitfalls, and we're trying to avoid quite a few of them for yourself as you come along your journey for truth. All right, go ahead, Larry.
On November 22nd, 1963, we have coined the motor jockeys of JFK Horsemen. Were divided in groups of 4, among them 18 motorcycle patrolmen led by Sergeant Stavis Ellis, where we had the lead motorcycles, and then we had groups where we had around the motorcycle, the JFK limo, successively all the way back to the press bus, where we had Marion Baker, who was accompanying the press bus. The 4 main motorcycle patrolmen, that they were Bobby Hargis and B.J. Martin on the left side of the limo, and James Chaney and Douglas Jackson on the right.
All right, so everyone remember that. Chaney and Jackson on the right. Then we had Hargis, and who was the other fellow?
B.J. Martin.
All right, now the famous person way in the back is Marion Baker, and he's the one who's in the famous clip where he's rushing into the school book depository and supposedly runs into Oswald in the lunchroom. That's actually in JFK, Oliver Stone's movie.
Yeah, and he is seen in a couch film where he's visible getting off his motorcycle and running towards the entrance of the TSDB.
And what film is that?
The Couch.
Okay, can you spell it for us?
C-O-U-C-H.
All right, so that's a famous film, and you JFK researchers, including myself, need to know that. Go ahead.
Now, first of all, Bobby Hodges is the first motorcycle officer that we're going to talk about today and run some clips for you. Well, most researchers are familiar with the story of how Bobby was hit with brain and skull matter with such force that he thought he himself had been shot. And, well, how important did the commission consider Hodges' experience that day? Well, they dedicated a total of 3.5 pages to his testimony, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is trace Hodges' movements after the shots, where Hodges testified that he ran to the light post and then he ran up to the little wall, obviously reacting like everyone else who was going up at the top of the knoll. Now that little wall that he's talking about is actually the little pedestal where Abraham Zapruder had been filming.
Right. Now the lamp post, that's where the Newmans were standing?
Yeah, right in front of the Newmans, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. What we see in the Bell film, standing by the lamppost, when you look at that, a couple of those images there, you'll see that Zapruder's not on his pedestal anymore. So that gives you an idea of the timeline of when the image we extract from the Bell film, as far as the timeline is concerned. So Hodges, when you see him there standing by that little lamppost, we're talking about already probably a minute has gone by. So what that tells us is that a couple of frames, maybe more frames than we realize from that Bell film have been removed. Mm-hmm. Amazingly enough, because we don't see Abraham Zapruder there. And so what this tells us is that Bobby has already gone up and come back and stood by the lamppost on his way to go back and cross Elm Street again to remount his motorcycle and then go under the underpass and come back, which is what he did. And he's seen in a few images doing that. Specifically, later on we find him in the Wigman, in the Bond images, where he's ready to jump on his motorcycle, and we see him from the Dave Wigman film, when Dave Wigman, when he was passing by, that was almost a minute, maybe even 45, a little more than a minute and 15 seconds after the fatal shot at the Zapruder 313. What this tells us is that that whole convoy motorcade stopped momentarily. Now, what we want to try to do is figure out how many seconds it stopped. I'll just briefly play a couple of clips here by Bobby Hodges, and in this first clip, not only does he talk about the limo stuff, but he also talks about Jackie getting out of the car and the reason that Jackie was trying to get out of the car.
Shot or something.
Oh, you talking about Jackie Kennedy?
Was that Jackie yelling that?
Oh, afterwards. Yeah. Boy, she was.
What was she yelling?
Huh?
You remember what she was yelling?
Yeah, oh my God, they killed Jack, something like that. But I'll tell you what, of course, is this off the record?
This is all off the record.
It is?
Yes, sir. I'm not writing any kind of a book, have no fear.
Well, what struck me strange was he started, excuse me, when he fell over to his left, and she was sitting on the left, and that Secret Service man almost stopped that car.
Right.
And but after the first shot, we almost stopped the car. Then after the second shot, well, he fell over on Jackie, and she was just, boy, she just didn't want to have anything. She didn't want to touch her, and she was trying to get out of that car. She wasn't concerned with getting that Secret Service agent. He was just blocking her way to get out.
Right, that was Clint Hill, I think.
Huh?
That was Clint Hill who was trying to keep her in. Her bodyguard.
Yeah. Well, he did. All right, she couldn't get out.
That, that kind of feels strange to me. I kind of think that there was some action in the car. Why the hell would she want to get out of the car?
Scared, I guess. Just panicked. That's the only other thing that I can think of, because she was hollering unintelligible words. I
Right.
didn't understand what she was saying. Okay, so that's our first clip on Bobby Hodges, and now I want to play a second clip for from Bobby Hodges regarding the limo stop.
Was that the only time that it stopped? That and over at the on Elm Street?
Yeah, I believe so.
Do you remember how long it stopped when it was on Elm Street?
Oh, you mean after that first shot?
Right.
Only about 3-4 seconds, maybe 5 or 6. That's all.
You say it stopped for about 5 or 6 seconds?
Yeah, but you won't find that in the Warren Commission report.
Don't they claim that it stopped?
Huh?
Don't they claim that it stopped?
No, I don't think he didn't. You've seen a rolling stop, haven't you? It's going less than 1 mile an hour.
Right, right.
Well, that's what he was doing. He wasn't completely stopped to the dead still.
You guys on the bike must have had a hell of a time trying to stay up on the bike.
Yeah, we did.
Just about walking him.
Huh?
You were just about walking with him.
Yeah, that's right. We burn our clutches quite a bit on this course like that.
Right.
Now, Gary, Bobby Hodges is talking about 5 or 6 seconds for the limo to stop. Now, 5 or 6 seconds is a long time.
How clear can you be?
And unfortunately, yes, he's pretty clear on that in this audio tape. Now, we don't see that in the Zapruder or the film or the Nix films.
That's right, because they've been altered.
Well, apparently, but all this information that we're starting to see now it had been, unfortunately, it had not come out. It had been around, since 1971. Like I said, only now are we realizing the importance.
So this is an interview conducted in 1971
by Fred Newcomb for his book Murder from Within. We have other instances where Bobby has spoken about this. For example, on June 26, 1995, and this is a clip that you have over there in your studio. Hodges was interviewed, and this is an interview that is also on YouTube. I'm not sure. I believe Ian Briggs might have done this one. And he also talks about the limo stopping. And I'll quote here Hodges. He said, "This is not to be shown publicly, but that guy slowed down. Maybe his orders was to slow down, whether the rest of the guys." He's interrupting Mr. Greer, the driver of the presidential limousine, and Hodges said, "Yeah, the presidential limousine slowed down almost to a stop."
This is not to be shown publicly, but that guy slowed down. Maybe his orders was to slow down where the rest of the guys...
This is Greer, the driver of the presidential limousine.
Yeah, presidential limousine slowed down almost to a stop.
All right, there you go. Right. See, a lot of times we didn't realize the historical significance of what these guys were saying. And they were saying it a long time ago, and these guys were right there. Bobby Hodges to the left, Rear, the one who famously said he thought he had been hit, he'd been sprayed by so much brain matter. So there you go.
And what's so amazing to me also, Gary, that none of the men that were closest to the assassination, which were these 4 motorcycle cops, were never interviewed by anybody except, in fact, nobody interviewed them. Not the FBI, the Secret Service, the Dallas Police Department. Only 2 of them went before the Warren Commission, which were Marion Baker and Bobby Hodges. I believe B.J. Martin went to before the Garrison, before Garrett,
Jim Garrison
for the Straw trial in 1969. And so basically, the most important witnesses to the assassination were totally ignored. And I want to. This is really funny at night. Or if it wasn't so tragic, it wouldn't be funny.
Yeah, it reminds me of Gomer Pyle. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Well, and this is really something, because James R. Malley, and this happened in 1975 when the FBI belatedly interviewed some of these motorcycle cops. They brought James R. Malley out of retirement to try to explain why these motorcycle policemen were not interviewed at the time. And I'm going to quote here. Regarding the motorcycle officers, he speculated they never came to our attention as being persons who could furnish pertinent information. Now, I have to laugh because, you know, there's just no other reaction. I think it's downright absurd.
Guilty.
And disrespectful.
Guilty is the word.
Disrespectful that, yeah, that Malley would try to infer, you know, that these men, you know, didn't have any pertinent information. You know, in fact, he went further, saying that numerous people who were in the immediate vicinity on foot would have had a better view, and therefore would have been better suited as witnesses than the 4 escorts that were within a few feet of the limousine during the entirety of the assassination. And we're talking about men who were trained to be prepared for emergencies and other contingencies.
Yes.
So, Gary, this just...
this wasn't their first motorcade by any stretch of the imagination. These men were experienced motorcycle riders, and they're telling the truth.
Right.
You see, I enjoy listening to the real witnesses that were there instead of anybody's book or anything they've written, because if you really weren't there, you really can't get the type of information that you're getting right here from the people.
Right, and for them to have been ignored, just speaks volumes.
Yes, it does.
Of the magnitude of the cover-up here by all of these agencies. And, you know, it's a very, very sad situation. But now we're able to correct all of it and paint for you a much better picture about what happened on Elm Street there. And let's quickly move on to James Shaney.
Right, but quickly, can I say that all 4 patrolmen were sprayed with blood matter? Is that true?
That's correct. That's correct. The night of the assassination, James Shaney was interviewed by ABC News, and even the reporter made a comment saying that this patrolman was so close to the president following the 3 shots that his uniform was splattered with blood. And we also have Douglas Jackson, who was splattered with blood. He was right behind Shaney. So all 4 of them were splattered with blood and brain debris. The only thing that we note is that Bobby Hodges was the one who was the most splattered with blood, followed by B.J. Martin.
Right behind him.
That's right, who was right behind him. James Shaney was the officer that is seen in the Option 6, looking right at Kennedy, looking to his left, and who he is to Kennedy's right. And in the famous Option 6 photograph, he cannot be more than 3 feet away.
Arm's length.
From JFK. That's right. So he had first row seats to the assassination.
And he was not called? He was not called?
Never, of course not. Well, don't forget also that he drove up to tell Chief Curry about the severity of the shots, of how bad JFK had been hit. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit if we have a chance, because a lot of my research also indicates the people that were in Curry's car, namely Sheriff Decker, FBI Agent Winston Lawson, or Sorrells, who was in the backseat of the lead car. And we need to specify what was the lead car. The lead car was the car that Chief Jesse Curry was driving.
Bill Decker.
And it was right in front. Bill Decker in the back seat and 4 Sorrells. And they're seen in the Option 7. And in the Option 7, now, we've talked about it in a previous show, you can see the brake lights are on. And you can also see Sheriff Decker turned around, looking right at what's going on in the JFK limo. What I have researched, and I've come to the conclusion that the people that were in that car, Ford Mercury, did not need Shaney to come up to tell them what was going on in JFK's car. That JFK just had his brains blown out. Shaney is popularly known to have been the motorcycle cop that drove up to tell those people about what was going on. But like I said before, the Option 7 has been altered just like a lot of the rest of the photographs.
Right, to obfuscate that fact that they were turned around watching everything.
That's right. We've done a show about this. It's on record and it's in the archives. Anybody wants to listen to that. But basically, James Shaney gave us much more information, and he fills out more of the picture when he talks about how Bobby Hodges, after he dismounted from his bike, ran in between the 2 limos. Now, this dovetails with what Bobby Hodges is talking about, where they stop for 5 or 6 seconds that we just talked about. So when James Chaney talks about Hodges running in between the two limos, then it's pretty obvious that that whole caravan, that whole motorcade stopped completely.
A complete stop, and I want everyone to get that. This clip proves that the entire limousine came to a complete halt. If you have a man running in between the two cars, and they were close together.
That's right. So let me play that for you real quickly here. Okay? Okay. All right. Target jumped off the motor and run off the lake.
That's another thing.
I don't recall myself stopping for that stop thing, though. I must have come almost to stop Target to get off his motorcycle over on the left-hand side and run between those two cars and run late. Apparently I don't recall stopping, but I must have.
Well, look, we'll hold it right there. This is The Real Deal. We'll be right back with Larry Rivera and new information about the Horsemen, the men who are riding closest to Kennedy. We're running a little behind, so we're going to get right to it. Let's go, Larry.
Okay, now, in 1975, I was mentioning about the FBI interviewing the motorcycle cops. And at that time, they were mostly preoccupied with establishing that the motorcycle officers heard 3 evenly spaced shots, and that each of them looked over their right or left shoulder towards the Texas School Book Depository. Now, as we go on, with the next couple of motorcycle officers that we're going to talk about, we're going to realize that was a total fabrication, okay? Because when you look at the Zapruder film, you don't see any of them looking over their shoulders, and you don't see any of them reacting or flinching or anything in response to gunfire.
Mm-hmm.
So
because they couldn't hear anything.
That's right. Because from the research that I have done, it's pretty obvious that they could not hear anything over the noise of the Harley Davidsons, that they were riding in. And this also is important because I spoke to Tony Glover a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that Tony remembered most was the enormous noise that 8 motorcycles, as she said, 8 motorcycles, me and James Norwood, Professor Norwood, interviewed on September the 6th. Mm-hmm. And we had a very interesting interview with Tony, and she was talking about this, and she spoke about the noise of the sirens and the noise of the Harleys and whatnot, and that most people didn't actually hear anything.
Right.
So how could these motorcycle officers hear gunshot over the din of the motorcycles is beyond me, especially when they were riding in pairs, Gary. So that's one of the issues here that we're going to talk about. And also James Bowles, wrote a paper in 1979 where he was trying to refute the Victor Belt recordings, and he also talked about the noise that the motorcycle officers had to endure. Gary was at that time was doing the research on the motorcycle Victor Belt that was recorded, out of J.B. McLean's motorcycle that was recorded, and where that recording, what it shows, what you hear is one shot, and then a little space of time, and you hear 2 almost simultaneous shots, almost one on top of the other, which by no means does that show 3 evenly spaced shots, as the FBI reported in these interviews. Now, in these interviews also, I want to talk about 3 FBI agents who took these statements, and one of them was Charles Brown. And Charles Brown was involved in other aspects of the JFK investigation. So we know that he was around for a lot of the work done by the FBI. But 2 other men, and at first these interviews, the identities of these men was redacted from these documents. So when Harold Weisberg sued the government to get these, you can see the identity at the bottom. They had been crossed out in black. Harold was able to deduce, that one of them was Charles T. Brown, but not the other two guys. These two men that later we found out from documents that were released by the ARRB in the 90s, one David Israelson and Stephen Rand. We'll talk a little bit about these two gentlemen because these supposed FBI agents apparently were the sort of men in black, that were brought in, just for this one assignment to interview or supposedly interview, because we don't even have any real proof that they were interviewed, but these documents exist, where they supposedly interviewed these motorcycle policemen in 1975. And what's really amazing is that right after this interview, James Chaney passed away at a very early age, I believe 52 years old or something like that. We'll go on to the reactions of Chaney and Jackson before we move on. And if you look at them much more in the Nix film, you will see them reacting towards the knoll, towards where those three gentlemen are standing, I believe Emmett Hudson and two companions of his. They're not reacting over their left or right shoulders at all, like the 1975 interviews tell us. Instead, they're reacting towards the knoll, looking into the JFK limo and then straight up there towards the picket fence. And that is the area where one of these gentlemen, Douglas Jackson, which I believe was the famous knoll rider, and the knoll rider was theorized and postulated in the late 1960s by Beverly Brunson, based on all of the research that she did on the motorcycle policemen. In all JFK assassination documentation, you don't see them anywhere, except for in those two instances where they were doing these interviews by the motorcycle policemen. We move on to Billy J. Martin. Billy J., it's a very interesting story because he was going out with Gene Hill at the time. And the reason that Gene Hill and Mary Moorman were standing on the infield on the south curb of Elm Street was because they had this privilege, this privileged position there to take photographs of the president, and at the same time to get Billy in there, in the photograph.
They weren't there just for JFK.
Yeah, so Gene wrote a book called JFK, The Last Dissenting Witness, and the importance of this book is enormous because Gene gives us a lot of inside information on what was going on with the motorcycle policemen, what they were going through in the immediate aftermath. And as a matter of fact, Billy went on a hunting trip and totally disappeared right after the assassination. And Billy was one who talked about that he couldn't hear anything. He couldn't hear the shots over the noise of his motorcycle.
And he never came back?
But he came back weeks later.
I see.
After the smoke had cleared, so to speak. So he told Gene that he couldn't see what was happening. Furthermore, Gene talks about how Billy was circling his bike right there on Elm Street. Billy talks about how he thought that they were going to pick them all off, like ducks in a gallery. And then I quote, so I started circling, figuring a moving target would be harder to hit. Now, Gary, you don't see any of that in the Zapruder film, I'm sorry, or the Nix film.
Yeah.
So that's another very important detail. And he says that's what you were doing, Regine talking in the book, and where she saw puff of smoke and the figure with a gun behind the wooden fence, and then she went up there and started chasing the man, after cars kept passing by, because you see Gene Hill going up there in the Bell film, but after a couple of minutes had gone by. So anyway, Billy, when you look at the Zapruder film and you follow Billy, you don't see him flinching, you don't see him looking over either his right or left shoulder, and this also gives us an indication that what Jean was talking about in her book is true, that the motorcycle patrolmen could not hear what was going on, that they were reacting more to what they could see. Just right there on film, as much as we know that the Zapruder film has been altered and everything, we still see a couple of things, that are very important, and this is one of the most important things, because then Billy went to the Shaw trial, and over there he also said that he looked back to my right, and then he said, all during the shots I was looking to my left and right. I'm sorry, Billy, but that is not shown in the Zapruder film. So, these guys sort of had a libretto to follow, And unfortunately, it's not confirmed with the photographic and the film evidence that remains. So the thing about him turning his body is not shown at all in the extant Zapruder film. And Martin Hodges on that side are clearly visible for approximately 8 seconds. If you look between Zapruder 136 to 275, they're completely visible there, and they're not turning anywhere. They're just going straight ahead, and they're not flinching. You know, like I said, they're not reacting at all. One thing that I wanted to cover real quickly is about Jean Hill credibility, and why what Jean talks about in her book is so very important, because she talked about lamb chop in the JFK limo, and we know that it was confirmed to be true. Mm-hmm. She talked about going up the knoll, and you can see her in the Bell film going up the knoll. In fact, the Buska lady is right behind her. You know, then they took her up to the 4th floor of the county records building, and they introduced her to those agents and everything. You know, told her, what she was to say publicly and everything. Well, right after she comes out of there, she goes to the TV station for an interview over the phone, and they patch it in the TV station WBAP, and this guy Tom Whalen is trying to suppress her comments within 51 minutes after the assassination, where this man who was interviewing her, James Darnell, asked her, where did the shots come from? And Jean Hill said the shots came from the hill. And Whalen's immediate reaction to this is to put his index finger to his lips, look to the side, motioning to keep her quiet. That's not supposed to be aired at that time, like I said, due to her relationship with B.J. Martin, Jean's impressions during and after the assassination are extremely important. Like I said, it's the only inside information which gives an accurate portrayal of what the motorcycle policemen were going through in the aftermath of the JFK assassination.
Right, they had a decades-long relationship after that.
Yeah, so now we go on to Douglas Jackson, who Beverly Brunson thought was the unsung hero of the day. And she was the only researcher who really investigated this aspect of the motorcycle officers, and it happens to be that Douglas Jackson was the famous no rider, the one officer who took purposeful action at the time and ran his motorcycle up the embankment, and almost crashed it up there at the top of the steps, got out, and drew his gun, went up there and confronted whoever was back there. And this was witnessed by S.M. Holland and Lee Bowers, and these two Warren Commission testimonies that talk about that, and Beverly cited those two references.
Those are all railroad men that he's talking about who had a bird's eye vantage point.
That's right, and from different angles, Harry. One was behind and one was in front on Elm Street on the overpass. So and they both talk about the same event. So it's kind of hard to,
collaboration
to dispel that.
And a policeman throwed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride up the embankment on his motorcycle, and it turned over about halfway up the embankment. And he got out, got off his motorcycle and left it laying there and run on over to the fence with his gun in his hand.
The first one to appear on the scene, other than those who, of course, who were standing around, including two on top of the triple underpass, was one who rode a motorcycle up the incline coming up from the lower portion of Elm Street, and he rode perhaps 2/3 of the way up or more before he deserted his motorcycle. At the time of the shooting,
Beverly went further and she found more testimony interviews, FBI interviews, talking about the no rider. And she found more information. For example, there were a couple more gentlemen that were all cited in the Warren Commission in volume 22, and you've got a couple more people there that she cited: George Davis, James Simmons, Luke Winborn, Clement Johnson. All of these people talked about the Knoll Rider, a motorcycle escort who went up the embankment, who drove up the grassy slope. Okay, a police officer riding it on the grassy slope on the north side of Elm Street. You know, Johnson said his attention was attracted to the motorcycle escort. Stated that white smoke was observed near the pavilion, but he felt that this was smoke came from a motorcycle abandoned near the spot by a Dallas policeman. You know, all this information, facts, S.M. Holland and Lee Bowers. I'm just giving you facts. Brunson was very convinced that it was Mr. Jackson, and she called him, like I said, an unsung hero. Unfortunately, Douglas Jackson sort of disappeared right after the assassination. And another thing, that's very interesting and very important about Douglas Jackson, and I'm going to tell you about this right now. He was the only motorcycle officer who wrote an account of his experience that day. This written account found its way to the grapevine, so to speak, and we now have the information that he was offering about what happened that day. And I'm just going to quote one line here from that manuscript that he wrote the night of November the 22nd, 1963. And I'm going to quote here, "And Secret Servicemen were running past the presidential car, drawing their guns as they ran." Now, if you look at that statement, I don't see how you can ignore this, because this gives us even more evidence that that caravan stopped on Elm Street to the point where Secret Servicemen were running past the presidential car.
After that shooting incident, of course, pandemonium broke out. The Secret Servicemen, well trained in their job, immediately began fanning out into the crowd, looking for the assassin. A report after that shooting incident, of course, pandemonium broke out. The Secret Servicemen, well trained in their job, immediately began fanning out into the crowd, looking for the assassin. A report after that shooting incident, of course, pandemonium broke out. The Secret Servicemen, well trained in their job, immediately began fanning out into the crowd, looking for the assassin. A report had...
Well, I never did get too far from it, so I'd have to say that car just all but stopped.
For how long a period of time would you say?
Just a moment. Because of the length of time that I was stopped between the second shot and the third shot would have been but just a little bit. But I had stopped, put both feet down, looked toward the railroad track, back through the crowd, back to the car, time to see that third shot hit him. Then I turned around back to my right rear and looked again. Again, I never did look up at that window. Never did look up toward the top of the building.
Right. Now you say the car came to that stop between the second and third shot there, Magic.
Yeah.
And it stopped, and then that's when you were looking around at that point.
Right. Then I looked back to the car again in time to see this Secret Service agent crawling over up on the back of it.
Right, that was Clint Hill, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
He laid down right across the top of that convertible. Right over the seat.
And again, you don't see this in the Zapruder film or the Nix film. Now, why? Why is that the case? You know, I mean, we're coming at them from so many different angles and directions here. You know, it's kind of hard to ignore it, Gary.
There can be no doubt.
You know, sort of closes the deal here. What do you think, Gary?
These were the people that were there. See, we tend to listen to people who have written books or the photographic evidence. I'm speaking specifically of Robert Groden, who just steadfastly will not come around to the realization, and I believe there's something behind it. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but the fact is that here, what we're trying to do is bring the people that were there and what they had to say. This is what the people had to say, and I believe the more you listen to them, especially in the very beginning, in the first 24 to 48 hours, is where the real truth is, and then you have to trace it from there.
Exactly, and that's why we also have to offer this quote from Mr. Zapruder, and it's right there in the Warren Commission about what he experienced right after the shot, right after the headshot. and I'll quote this again also, yes, some of them were motorcycle cops. I guess they left the motorcycles running, and they were running right behind me, of course, in the line of shooting. And we're giving you so many different citations and quotes here that back up the notion of the motorcycle cops running up the embankment, motor jockey hero Douglas Jackson driving his bike up the knoll. It's, you know, like I said, it's very, very hard to ignore, Gary.
Yes,
so,
and the realization that the limousine came to a halt to allow an execution to occur in front of everyone, and everyone saw it, and everyone says the same thing. So we have to realize that the Zapruder film is not accurate, and I believe that we need to get a really good animator who could actually redo the Zapruder film with the evidence that we have today.
Yeah, if you look at the Nix and the Much More films, you'll see a little bit of indication of that this might have been exactly what was happening. If you look at the Nix film, you'll see that Emmett Hudson and his two unidentified companions that are standing on the steps leading up to the west side of the North Monument there on Dealey Plaza. You see them reacting and running towards the picket fence. The reason I'm bringing this up, Gary, is because Emmett very specifically talked about shots being fired above and behind him. Okay? And he said you could tell the shot was coming from above and kind of behind. Wesley Liebler, Warren Commission attorney, was interviewing him for his deposition in Volume 7. When you look at the Nix film, you see something totally out of the ordinary. There's, you know, why is Emmett Hudson and his two companions running in the direction of where they said shots are coming from? When human nature would have dictated, they would have done the opposite. They would have run away from that area. So this sort of gives us an indication that they might have been running away from that motorcycle that was, you know, rambling up the knoll right there, you know. And also you see the reaction of some of the witnesses, some of the people that are standing there. Instead of looking at Jackie, who is on the trunk of the limousine, they're not even looking. They're not even paying any attention to Jackie. They're looking towards the steps, right towards where Emmett Hudson and his companions seem to be running away from something that's coming towards them.
It's a Harley.
It's not seen. That's right. It's not seen in the Nix film. Of course it's not seen, because as Orville panned, well, he didn't actually pan because he wasn't looking for a viewfinder. He actually recorded the assassination by mistake, because he was just running around like everybody else, trying to avoid getting shot. But luckily, he caught that part of the assassination, but he did not catch the area of the steps there where the knoll rider was coming up the embankment. But you can see a reaction of some of the people there. And as I said, they're not looking at Jackie, which, as Brunson said, that was the fight of the decade, probably of the century. The first lady, you know, climbing over the trunk of the car, trying to get out of the car, as we just heard Bobby Hodges talk about.
I think you might be about to get run over by a Harley Davidson.
That's right. That's right. So that's, you know, like I said, that's more evidence that, in my mind, you know, that's pretty well defined there. You know, that we have to find out why those people were running away towards the direction of the shots instead of running away from the shots. So not very many people talk about that.
Larry, before we go, don't we have a clip of one of the motorcycle riders saying that they picked up a piece of brain and threw it in the car?
Yeah, we still got more here, Gary. Let's
okay, we're running out of time.
We still have the Davis Ellis, and he's going to talk about the limo stop. Okay, here.
The president's limousine stopped for a while, right at that point?
Well, no, it didn't stop. It almost stopped. If you haven't ridden a motor, you know if you go so slow, your motor will want to lean to one side. You have to put your foot down and balance it.
Right.
Well, we were going so slow that's what was happening. We was having to kick our foot down every once in a while. It was a very slow pace. This was after the first shot was fired. They so slow, and we were just barely moving. And then they hollered, "Go, go, go, let's go." And I came up and said, "Get him to the hospital as quick as you can."
Okay, so now we're going to talk. I want to talk a little bit here about Harry Freeman, okay, because he's sort of unsung in all this story. And Harry Freeman was riding right in front, left front, right in front of the JFK limo, right behind Curry's car, the lead car. And I want to play this clip for you, a couple of clips here, which pinpoint his position. And then we'll go on to why and what could have happened with Harry Freeman, okay?
What position did you have at that point when they were coming down Elm towards the underpass, I guess?
I was right to the left front then. I was out, some few feet out to the left front out there. I don't know exactly how far it is.
The lead car, Curry's car, you mean?
No. At that time, I was between Curry's car and the limousine, right.
And then you were at that position, I guess, when the shooting took place.
Right.
You remember?
Now, the significance of what Harry Freeman just told us is extremely important because Penn Jones wrote about the motorcycle cop that was responsible for bringing the entire motorcade to a halt. And when James Simmons was brought into the Clay Shaw trial, he spoke about what happened then, and he was asked, what did the limousine do then? And Simmons answered, it paused and then accelerated real fast after the motorcycle got out of the way. Now, Harry Freeman just told us that he was the only motorcycle cop that would have been in that position. So, by speculation on my part, and this is again speculation, it could have been Harry Freeman, who was the police officer who, as Penn Jones said, faked that he had stopped to find out what was going on and brought the entire caravan to a stop. So that's why it's so very important what we just heard, Officer Freeman, because this is brand new information, Gary. This has never been talked about, never been brought forth before about Harry Freeman's position. And now...
And not shown in the Zapruder film.
And it's not shown in the Zapruder film at all. So again, we're getting more and we're getting just so much confirming information here, and these are just facts. Penn Jones said that Simmons said he believed there was a motorcycle cop at the left front of the automobile who got in the way and who made it appear he was trying to find out what the shooting was all about. I think that's extremely important there. It's not, it's new stuff, new information that we're bringing out here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what Davis Ellis offered in these recordings about the piece of skull here.
No, I didn't get that close. I know that down on the street, a piece of his skull blew out of the car and blew over on the grass, and the kid picked it up, and the Secret Service man took it away from him and threw it in the back of the car. Our people, right there at the motor knew how bad he was hurt. I knew he was hit. I didn't know how bad he was until my man Cheney came up there and said he had no chance to get he said, he ain't got no chance, but let's go. He said his head was just, well, I didn't really know for sure until we got to the hospital, and there wasn't any chance for him. After talking to the officer, they come into the hospital.
And that piece of bone that the Secret Serviceman took from that young boy you say in the grass, then he came to the hospital and he threw it in the car there.
He put it in the car back at right there as it happened. Here, I remember.
Does it happen at on the street on the Elm?
Yes, sir.
The president's limousine stopped for a while, right at that point.
Well, no, it didn't stop. It almost stopped.
Okay, so that was Davis Ellis talking about a piece of skull. Again, the reason this is important, Gary, is because if that Secret Service man had enough time to take that piece of skull from the kid and throw it into the limousine, we're talking about even more.
Takes a long time to do that.
That's right. And finally, and this is information that offered by James Norwood, Professor James Norwood, who has investigated this also and is a very extremely competent JFK researcher. And he he gave me information on Jimmy Corson. Jimmy Corson was also one of the horsemen who was in the back of the motorcade around the area where Marion Baker was. And he gave an interview for the 50th anniversary. And Corson talked about, and I'm going to quote here, "Everything stopped. When I pulled up to the left side of the car and looked in, Mrs. Kennedy looked up. There was brains and blood and hair on the jump seat in front of the president. And the flowers were all over the seat and on the floor. I knew exactly what happened to the president." This is stunning here, information that completely contradicts what is seen in the extant Zapruder film. It sort of seals the deal here, Gary. I don't see how, sort of wrap this all up. There are many instances here that we have given your audience where that proves that the motorcade came to a stop, and not just for a couple of seconds, but maybe even more, as much as 5 or 6 seconds. We keep developing this information.
Yes.
Fortunately, now we know what really happened there on Elm Street.
That's right. That's the number one secret in the JFK community. When it comes to new research, no one tops Larry Rivera. This is a real deal. We'll see you next week.
Well, I can recall seeing the president's car turn onto Houston Street off of Main, make a right-hand turn. Could travel that short block of distance and turn left onto Elm. Of course, the crowd was very excited, just as we were, to see the President of the United States. And as the car came towards us, he was out about the width of one lane from the curb lane. As he came towards us, the first 2 shots rang out. And it was a boom, boom, about like that. They were 100 or so feet probably from us. But as the car got closer to us, I could see Governor Connally in the car, and him more or less stretched out, and the blood on his shirt and his protruding eyes. And just about that time, the car passed in front of us, and about as close as I am to Steve, probably some 10, 12 or so feet out from us, the 3rd shot rang out, and I can recall seeing the side of President Kennedy's head blow off. I could see a mass of white and then the blood and fragments, and I turned to Gil and said, "That's it, hit the ground." Yes, sir. We turned around and threw our kids back on the grass and covered them there. And I can remember looking back and, and seeing the car slow down or nearly come to a complete stop, and then accelerate and take off and go out of sight into the triple underpass. And when I say stopped, I only mean that, like you hit apply the brakes and then get off the brakes and take off. It was when I look back. But in the Zapruder film, it never shows the car stopping. If I say stop, then somebody interprets that the car stopped for 30 seconds or a minute or a long period of time. I do think the car stopped momentarily. And when I say momentarily, I'm just talking about looking over and seeing the brake lights, and it hit and kind of rocked the car. And one of them had, a two-way radio or phone or something to their ear. And then they floorboarded it, by the time the Secret Service got over and the agent got over in the car, the other Secret Service agent, they floorboarded and took off. So we're just talking about seconds.
It had always seemed to me that had the car speeded up, had there been better reaction on the part of the driver, they were only yards from what at least I perceived to be safety by getting on the expressway. But the car seemed to it didn't move. After that first shot, it just didn't move.
Let us recount this incident again. There has been an assassination attempt against the life of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. The President, Mrs. Kennedy, and Governor Connally of Texas, en route from the Dallas airport to a speech the President was scheduled to make at noon in Dallas, were in the President's famed bubble-top car, driving through cheering crowds in the streets of Dallas when 3 shots rang out. The President slumped into the lap of Mrs. Kennedy, apparently a bullet wound in his head. Governor Connally slumped to the floor of the car. Bullet wounds were seen in his chest. The Mrs. Kennedy screamed out, "Oh no!" The car stopped momentarily. Secret Servicemen unloaded their rifles and started into the crowd. Two persons, a man and a woman, were seen crouched with a crowd around them on a hilltop overlooking the road. Whether they were concerned in the shooting or not, we do not know yet. Secret Servicemen rushed to that scene and were waiting a report on that.
We heard the shots very clearly, but it was almost inconceivable at that stage that this was an assassination. About no more than 2 or 3 seconds elapsed before the car that the president was traveling. This was an open limousine that had been sent out from the White House fleet in Washington. This car came to an immediate stop. The Secret Service follow car. Some of the agents piled out, then almost immediately leaped back in. We saw one of them pull out a submachine gun. They leaped back into the car, and the motorcade took off very rapidly. It had just entered a throughway.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
That's what we were told. Most Americans never believed Lee Oswald was the lone gunman, for excellent reasons. In fact, there were at least 6 shooters who fired from 8 to 10 shots or more who are identified here. We have, finally, the solution to the greatest murder mystery in history, laid out for the world to see, proof after proof after proof. Photos were faked, the body was changed, x-rays were altered, the home movies were fixed. 15 experts contribute to a 529-page book with 1,037 photos and diagrams in black and white and color.
Hi, this is Gary King. If you'd like JFK, who, how, and why, and would like to support the new JFK show, then go to PatriotRadioBooks.com. That's PatriotRadioBooks.com.